Hello girls, I hope you're staying safe at home. So now we move on to the next chapter in biology, that is skeleton, which is responsible for the movement and locomotion of the whole body. Now you know that all the animals, they have a definite shape and they can move different parts of their body, as well as they can move from place to place. So movement from place to place is known as locomotion, and these movements that are seen in the body of animals are performed by the skeleton and the muscles together. Now, what are the functions of the human skeleton? It has six main functions. The first is support and shape. The skeleton gives support or framework to all the soft parts and gives body and its different parts a definite shape. Now, if you look at the different parts of your body, your nose, your mouth, your ears, your fingers, they have a definite shape. Okay, so it is the skeleton which gives this shape, and it also supports the different parts of the body. Supposing, look at your fingers are made up of small pieces of bones known as phalanges. Now supposing if you had a solid bone in each finger, imagine how would you be able to hold a pen in your hand. And look at your ears, hold your ears, fold it, and then leave it free. It comes back to its original shape, doesn't it? So now feel your ears. You can see it is very tough, hard, but it is flexible, means you can easily like change its shape. But again, when you leave it, it will come back to its original shape. So what is inside your ear? You have the cartilage skeleton, which gives support to the ears as well as it gives the shape to the ears. Next function of the skeleton is protection. There are so many delicate and important organs inside our body which is protected by the casing of bones. Examples, the skull, it protects the brain, you know. The vertebral column or the backbone protects the spinal cord which runs through it. The ribs, what is inside the ribs? The heart and the lungs. So similarly, different parts, different organs are protected by the skeleton. Next is movement. Many bones are joined to each other in such a way that bone can move on another. And these movements are brought about by muscles which start or originate on one bone and it is inserted on the other bone. Next is leverage. Some bones and joints, they form levers. You know what are levers? Which makes work easier, okay, by increasing the speed and distance of the movement by a muscle. For example, contraction of your bicep muscles on your upper arms. Okay, if you want to throw a stone, you contract the muscles and the muscle will swing the hand swiftly so that the stone can go to a very far distance. Okay, next is inside long bones, blood cells are formed. Red blood cells and white blood cells are formed in the tissue in the central hollow space of the bone. So in the bone marrow, some of the long bones such as the femur, what is formed? Red blood cells and white blood cells are formed. And also remember, the bones are a storehouse of calcium and phosphorus for the rest of the body. Now, what is the skeleton made up of? The constituents. Our skeleton is made up of bones, cartilages, and ligaments. Now, bones, you know, it is the hard framework of the body, and cartilages are the supporting and connecting structures. For example, the cartilage, as I already told you, you find it in your external ears and even the tip of your nose. You can feel the tip of your nose. You can see how it is soft also, but it is rigid also. Okay, and what are ligaments? Ligaments bind the bones together. The bones are, you can say, tied to each other by means of ligaments. The skeleton of the head is known as the skull, which is made up of two parts. The upper top part is known as the cranium, which is made up of 8 bones. The cranium is also known as the brain box because it protects the brain inside the head. Okay, and the 8 bones of the cranium are joined to each other to form immovable joint, and they are permanently fixed like tiles on the floor. The other part of the skull is the bones that you find in your face, and you find a total 14 bones there. Okay, out of the 14 bones, the upper and the lower jaw are also formed by these bones. Now the back part of the cranium, right at the back above your neck, at the back part, you will find a hole there which is known as the foramen magnum, and the brain, it becomes thin at this region and passes through the foramen magnum into the backbone. Now next we move on to the vertebral column. The vertebral column, also known as the spinal column or the backbone as you know it, is made up of 33 ring-like vertebrae. Okay, these are small ring-like bones. Okay, and there are some bones which are fused together, becomes one, and total when we count like that it is 26 altogether, but 33 bones are there. Okay, and these are divided into 5 groups according to the regions they occupy in the body. The neck region has 7 bones, 7 vertebrae altogether, known as cervical. Cervical means the neck. And 12 thoracic, the chest region. 5 lumbar as you move to the upper back part. 5 sacrum as you move to the lower back, which is fused into one bone. 5 vertebrae fused into one. And the last one, you have 4 coccyx, which is fused into one. 4 vertebrae, they are fused into one. Now remember children, the vertebral column is not straight, it is slightly curved. Okay, and why is it curved? To maintain the balance of the body when we are standing straight, when we are erect. The curve also absorbs pressure and shock when we are walking or running, so that the backbone does not. So what is the structure of a vertebrae? You see that each vertebrae is a ring-like structure. This is the structure of a vertebrae. Its lower part, when we talk about the lower part, we are talking about the front in actual position of our body. The front part facing towards our front. It is made up of a solid bone, a cylinder of bone, which is known as centrum or body of the vertebra. So this entire part is solid and it is known as the centrum. Okay, the two opposite ends, so this is the front end and opposite end is behind this. Okay, they are both flat, and on the dorsal or the back side means this side, this is the back side, you see the neural canal. Okay, which is formed by the union of 2 neural arches. So this is one neural arch and this is another neural arch. So when they fuse together, an empty space is formed, which is known as the neural canal. Okay, so in natural position, when you're standing straight, the spinal cord runs through this neural canal. Neural spine, so here you can see the neural spine poking out, the part which you can feel at the back. The neural spine is a flat and longitudinal ridge which projects upward from the meeting point, from this point, and from this meeting point this neural arch points towards the upward position. So, and at the side you see transverse process here and another transverse process here. Okay, 2 transverse processes like wings you can see. Okay, and they are thick and sideward projections from the neural arches. Okay, from the neural arch, one transverse process goes here, another transverse process comes here, and at the center what is formed? The neural spine. The neural arches also bear articular facets. Here you can see articular facet here. Okay, for the rib facet here, what joins? The rib joins. Okay, and you will see these articular facets, one in the front and one behind on each side, which help in joining 2 vertebrae. One, now you know this, there are 33 of such small vertebrae, so they must be sticking to each other, so they join together with in the articular facet. Okay, and in between 2 vertebrae there is a pad of cartilage which is known as intervertebral disc or gristle, which forms a kind of cushion so that there is no friction during twisting, turning, bending of our backbone. Okay, so before I continue further, your assignment for this week is to draw the human skeleton, and you will submit it as usual day after tomorrow. The 33 total vertebrae are arranged in 5 groups according to the regions where they are seen. So the first group is the neck or the cervical vertebrae. Total 7 are there, 7 vertebrae. The first vertebrae is known as the atlas, and the second vertebrae is known as the axis. The remaining 5 vertebrae, the cervical vertebrae, do not have any special names. Next is the thoracic vertebrae. You know there are 12 thoracic vertebrae in all, and they have very long neural spines. You know what neural spines are because I just explained in the structure of the vertebrae, and they are directed backwards. Each of the transverse processes which are coming out from the side, and you know these transverse processes at the tip has a facet for articulation with the tubercle of the rib. The tubercle of the rib means the tip of the rib. It comes from the front, or from it attaches itself to the thoracic vertebrae by means of the facet. Next is the lumbar vertebrae, 5 in all. Okay, they also have very well developed neural spines and transverse processes which attaches to the powerful back muscles. You know, muscles help in movement. Next you have sacrum, 5 in all. Okay, it is one single bone but formed by the fusion of 5 vertebrae. 5 vertebrae came together, fused together, and formed the sacrum. And here to the sacrum on the left and the right side, the hip bones are attached or articulated. And finally we come to the last part of the backbone. 4 fused vertebrae forms the coccyx. Okay, it also represents the rudimentary tail of the human body. It is said that humans evolved from monkeys, isn't it? So monkeys have tails, and maybe this rudimentary tail is the remains of the tail which humans had long time back. You never know. Sometimes you may have seen babies which are born with a small tail and it is removed by surgery. You can take a look at the photograph at the end of the review questions here. Now, next is the sternum. If you feel the center of your chest, you can feel a flat bone. It is long, flat, and it is lying in the middle of the front part of the chest. It is known as the sternum or the breastbone. Now, next we come to the ribs. There are 12 pairs of ribs, which along with the thoracic vertebrae at the back, the sternum or the breastbone in the front, make up a bony cage or a rib cage. You know, the rib cage or the bony cage protects the hearts and the lungs inside. Okay, now here you can see the first rib, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh are directly attached to the sternum. This is your sternum. Okay, directly attached. They are known as true ribs. Okay, 8th, 9th, and 10th, if you look at the diagram, you will see that they are not directly attached to the sternum, but they are attached to the 7th rib. Okay, and the last two, 11th and 12th, you can see it is more or less incomplete. It does not come up and it does not connect either to the rib or either to the sternum. So the last two, 11th and 12th ribs are known as floating ribs. And of course this is the vertebral column at the back, okay, where it goes and articulates, the rib goes and articulates with the vertebrae at the back. Now next we move on to appendicular skeleton or bones of the limbs and girdles. Bones of the forelimbs means the hands, and hind limbs means the legs. They are more or less corresponding to each other, more or less similar. Now the forelimbs consist of a long single bone which is known as the humerus in the upper arm. So the bone in your upper arm is known as humerus, and in your lower arm below the elbow you have two long bones in the lower arm. The radius towards your thumb, there is one single bone which is known as the radius, and the other one towards your little finger is known as the ulna. Okay, and in the wrist you have tiny wrist bones, total 8 in all. They are known as carpals. Okay, and in the palm there are total of 5 metacarpals and 14 phalanges, that is fingers, 2 in the thumb and 3 each in the remaining 4 fingers. Okay, similarly the hind limb or the legs consists of a long bone femur, that is the thigh bone. Okay, and please remember, it is important for your one word answers, fill in the blanks, especially the section 1. The longest and strongest bone of the body, what is it? It is the femur. And as we move below the knee, again there also there are two long bones of the inner tibia. Inner side it is known as the tibia, and the outer side is known as the fibula in the shank, okay, or your calves. Next, in the ankle there are 7 tarsals. Remember, in the wrist it was known as carpals. Okay, there were 8 carpals in the wrist, but in the ankle there are 7 tarsals. Okay, tarsal bone, 5 long metatarsal bones in the middle of the foot. Okay, and 14 phalanges, just like as those in the fingers, two in the toe, 3 each in the other 4 toes. The hind limbs have an additional one more extra bone which is not there in the forearms or the hands, and the additional extra bone is known as the patella or the kneecap, which is joined to the lower end of the femur. Okay, and remember that this kneecap developed or came from a tendon. You know what a tendon is. It connects the bones to the muscles. Okay, now next, moving on to the girdles. Now girdles are the part of the skeleton which helps to join the limbs, that is the hands and the legs, to the main skeleton. You know the main skeleton is the body, the axial skeleton. Now there are 2 girdles. One is in the shoulder which connects the hands to the main body, and the other one is the hips or the hip girdle which connects the legs to the main. The shoulder girdle is also known as the pectoral girdle. Here you can see the diagram of the left pectoral girdle as viewed from the back side. You can see that it is made up of a flat triangular shoulder blade, which is also known as scapula, and the scapula lies dorsally behind on the upper ribs on either side of the vertebral column in the thoracic region. Now its outer apex, this tip, contains a cup-shaped glenoid cavity. This portion is the glenoid cavity. It is somewhat cup-shaped depression here, okay, and to which fits the rounded upper head of the humerus, that is the bone of the arm, the long bone. So it comes and fits inside. Okay, and you can see close to this joint here, to the glenoid cavity, there is a small raised part, this part, raised part, and to this raised part the collarbone, which is also known as the clavicle, will come and join. From the front it will come and join, and it will go all along towards the front and join to the uppermost part of the sternum or the chest bone. Okay, now next we have the hip girdle, also known as the pelvic girdle. Now you can see it is large and it is in the shape of a trough, okay, a container formed by 2 hip bones. This is one hip bone and this is another hip bone, and they are joined medially in the middle to the sacrum. Each hip bone is made up of 3 fused bones. First is known as the ilium, next is the ischium, and next is the pubis. So 3 bones make up the hip bone. On each side you can see a large cup-shaped, again a cavity, articular cavity, which is known as acetabulum. So here inside it is hollow here, okay, so that the large rounded head of the thigh bone can come and easily get inside here, okay, falling so that it can articulate and the joint is formed here. The hip girdle supports the skeleton of the hind limbs and also protects and supports the abdominal organs. Now, joints are the point in which two separate bones meet. There are three types of joints in our body: immovable, partially movable, and freely movable. I had already talked about immovable joints when I did the skull. So you find the joint in the skull, in the cranium. Okay, here no movement is possible between the two bones. They are permanently fixed, and the example is the bones of the cranium. Next is partially movable joints. Here only very little movement occurs between the two bones. The joint between a rib and the breastbone and between the vertebrae are examples. Now there are freely movable joints too in our body, where you'll see lots of movement possible between the two bones forming the joint. There are four types of movable joints in our body. First is known as the gliding joint, which you find between the bones of the wrist and the bones of the ankles, as well as between the vertebrae. Next is the pivot joint. So here there is one bone which rotates over a pivot like end of another bone. Okay, for example, the skull is rotated on the upper end of the axis vertebra, that is the vertebra of the neck. Okay, next we have the hinge joint. This joint moves like the hinge of the door in one plane only. Okay, example is elbow joint between the humerus and the ulna, and the bones of fingers and the toes, and less perfectly the knee joint. Okay, and the hinge joint gives sufficient power. That is why you can kick a ball to a large distance, even throw a stone or throw anything with the hands of with your hands, due to the hinge joint that is present in the elbows. Next we come to the ball and socket joint. So here you will see one end of a bone which is rounded and like a ball. It fits into a cup like depression of another bone, and this joint provides movement in any direction. You can rotate your arms 360 degree. Okay, so example, shoulder joint and the hip joint. Now in the shoulder joint, as we had already discussed, the head of the humerus fits into the glenoid cavity, cup-like cavity of the shoulder girdle. Similarly, in the hip, the large ball-like head of femur is fitting into the acetabulum of the hip girdle. Next type of joint that we have in our body are known as synovial joints. It is not a different, actually these are joints like the shoulder joint and the knee joint, which shows maximum movement, and these joints are known as synovial joints. Why? Because they have a lubricating fluid inside them, which is known as synovial fluid. Since these joint shows considerable degree of movement, they must also be held in position, firmly in position, so that it does not easily move out. Okay, and these surfaces are coming in contact so that no friction is there. So due to this, the synovial fluid is present in these joints to lubricate this area. That is why the name synovial joint. Now the knee joint, for example, is a synovial joint. It is held in position by ligaments, very strong, and it is protected by the outer fibrous capsule. The ligaments does not allow the dislocation in normal movement, and the synovial fluid is there. It is contained in a sac formed of very thin synovial membrane, and this sac serves as a cushion between the bones. And of course, inside the synovial membrane, what do you find? You find the synovial fluid. There you can see, this is the knee joint, ligament is there, there is a joint capsule and synovial membrane. Inside the synovial membrane you have the synovial fluid, and then on top and bottom you have the cartilage. So there is maximum movement and it also reduces friction. So with this we come to the end of the skeleton chapter. Now children, apart from the assignment that I have given you in this chapter, I would want you to do another assignment in chemistry, and you will submit it along with this assignment, that is day after tomorrow, what you will do is from chapter 2, that is chemical changes and reactions, you will write down all the equations that you see in that chapter, and please learn it by heart. So children, till then, stay safe. God bless you.